All right. So today I'm very excited to welcome Mike Bender. Mike Bender is the New York Times best-selling co-author of Awkward Family Photos with Doug Chernak, where the pair also co-created the hit website awkwardfamilyphotos.com in 2009. All this after seeing an awkward vacation photo hanging in Mike's parents' house in Santa Barbara, I believe. Mike is a professional screenwriter. His credits include Not Another Teen Movie and the MTV Movie Awards. He's also written another children's book, The Book About Nothing, and now he delves into the children's book world even further with the wonderful The End is Just the Beginning, which you co-created with illustrator Diana Mayo. Please welcome Mike Bender.
Hey, Mike.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for arranging to put the birds out there for some sound effects too.
Everybody
to your
comments
movie
on the
guy.
birds. Yeah, well, it is a very Disney bird-like sound going on behind me.
Well, I think it's appropriate for your book. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It truly is a wonderful book, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I wanted to first start with, what about your childhood? What do you remember most in the books that most influenced you, and mediums, movies, and whatnot?
Yeah. I think that like most people, you know, for me, books and especially children's books, picture books, I remember them so vividly, and I feel like those, that's to me the power of a children's book is like it sticks with
Mhm,
you for life.
mhm,
Something that's 28 pages with only so many words
mhm.
can be so impactful. So, when I look back, and I still have this on my shelf, but books like like The Giving Tree and Where the Wild Things Are. Those were books that I think really just captured my imagination and made me think you could do so much in these 28 pages. You have the freedom to go so many places, and so I think that I think it was those kinds of books that I remember, and then I remember graduating to kind of. I've got my kids now reading the Beverly Cleary Ramona books.
Mhm.
And I just remember spending a lot of time at the library reading Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary, um,
Uh-huh.
and being really taken by those books and those characters.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. What about you did you start when you're a kid? Did you write when you were younger, high school, or did it ever take to you right away?
Always wrote, always was excited about the opportunity whenever, like in school, we'd get that opportunity to do a creative writing assignment, or they'd say there's no topic, you can write whatever you want. um, that was the most exciting time for me at school, when I had
Mhm.
a blank slate to work with. And,
Mm,
and so I think even from a very young age, I remember teachers commenting or telling my parents that I'm daydreaming a lot during class. Um, and I think that my brain always has kind of drifted to other places.
yeah.
And so that daydreaming was thinking. I just wasn't always in the room or whatever the lesson was at the time. But I definitely, and that carried on through high school and into college.
Mhm,
The creative writing, storytelling is just so much fun. It never felt like work.
mhm,
I think that's why I
mhm.
I always enjoyed it in school.
Did you want to write books or movies or?
Yeah, I think they're all interesting to me. Each one is just a different vehicle to tell a story. So I thought, the idea of writing a book was very, very exciting. And then as I got older, I think I got really taken by movies. Like most, teenagers, you start watching a lot of movies, and I went to the video store and, tried to watch
Mhm,
everything I possibly could. And so um, I don't think I had one preference over another. I think that for me, it was just the idea of being able to tell a story to an audience, and perhaps, leave something impactful for someone else, that was really exciting. And
Mhm.
whatever that medium was, even if, it eventually in my life became creating a website, there are all ways to sort of create something and put it out there for people to view and to digest. And so, yeah, so I think they were all interesting to me.
Mhm. In terms of the movies, like the John Hughes movies you're talking about, and
Yeah,
a lot of the teen movies, right?
correct. I definitely I grew up in, in the 80s, and so the John Hughes movies and um, movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Breakfast Club,
Uh-huh.
very, very, they were, right in those formidable years and in my awkward teen years. So I could relate to Molly Ringwald's character. And I think years later with Not Another Teen Movie, it was kind of was able to come full circle.
Yeah. So obviously you wanted to pay homage by making it John Muir High School, or John Hughes High School, I should say.
Yes.
Um, how did this project come about? How did you decide to write a movie like Not Another Teen Movie?
Well, I should say I was a huge fan of parody. So I loved Airplane, Naked Gun, and I loved it so much that I became kind of a student of parody, and I started to study the structure of the jokes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, you see a parody movie, yes, no es otra tonto película americana. Um, I I was just really like interested in how you twist a joke and take a genre and bend it. And so
Uh-huh.
when I watch those movies and I watch them again and again and again, you start to sort of see how the jokes are structured. And then I read, the directors at the time, and this guy, I think Pat Proft was his name, was a writer who wrote with them all the time. Um, I think I read some manifesto they wrote, like a parody manifesto of like how you write parody, and I got really into
Mhm.
it. And so when I graduated college and I started to work, my first job was actually at Life magazine, but um,
Mm.
I really wanted to start writing movies. And so the very first thing I wrote was a parody of Titanic, which had come out at the time. It was called Gigantic, and it was about a ship that was 2.5 inches shorter, so it didn't get the same press coverage. But it was still a horrible disaster nonetheless. And that actually I ended up selling that script to New Line Cinema where I was working, and went very far down the road. We had a director, we were in production. We had done a roundtable at that time with SNL writers, like Tina Fey was a writer there at the time, and Dennis McNicholas and Adam McKay, who went on to become a
Wow.
director. And so it was crazy. And I was 22 years old, and
Uh-huh.
I remember wanting to throw up every day because I was so nervous to be in a room with people like that.
Yeah.
But that movie ended up kind of falling through at the very end because of budget.
Uh,
As you can
okay.
probably imagine, you're trying to do a parody of Titanic, you're going to have some budget problems. But
Uh-huh.
the movie fell through, and then I ended up getting a job working for the MTV Movie Awards, and through that, I got the opportunity to write for Ben Stiller and Will Ferrell and Andy Dick and all these people that were doing stuff on the movie awards. And it was a film I did on the movie awards. It was with Tom Cruise and Ben Stiller. He was Ben Stiller's stunt double for Mission Impossible, and um, and that short film is what got me the opportunity to write Not Another Teen Movie. So that was a
Okay.
script at Sony, and so I was brought on with the director, the guy who had directed that short film, Joel Gallen,
Hmm.
and then together, we really both shaped Not Another Teen Movie, and it was, like I said, it was movies that I was so passionate about. So parody, I believe, you have to love it to parody it.
Oh yeah.
If you don't love it, you don't respect it. So like you have to respect that genre, and I did. And so it was that, you have to go that deep to then be able to twist it and then turn it on its head.
it was obviously well loved, well received. I mean, it was a $15 million movie, cost to make, but it made 4 or 5 times that much, so it was very popular.
It,
Being
it
a young being a young guy, how were you able to deal with that kind of success when you're 22 when you wrote it? So,
yeah, very young.
mhm,
Well, I will say, just to be clear, when it came out, we'd expected it to explode like Scary Movie, and so everyone had really big expectations, and it didn't do amazing in the theater. It did respectably, but it opened up against Vanilla
mm,
Sky, ironically,
oh,
Tom Cruise. So I guess I deserve that for making fun of him. But where that movie really took, or I guess had life, was afterwards in video
mhm,
and in on demand, and kids at college watched it 20 times. And in a weird way, that was kind of my dream. Was like, I wanted to make a movie that someone would watch again and again and again and
mhm,
again, just to like get the references and all the lines. So it wasn't an outright success, but I think over time, and especially
mm,
Chris Evans being the lead, I think there's been
yeah.
curiosity about it now. Um, so it's just grown, and it's amazing, and I love it because I'll run into younger people and they've seen it, and it makes me feel not so old.
Mhm. So you're 22 then, but
Yes,
then your next big thing was Awkward Family Photos, right? And
yes, yes.
you're a little bit you're a bit older. I mean, it's an R-rated movie that you made. A lot of raunchiness. Hilarious, by the way, but a lot
Thank
of
you.
raunchiness
Yes.
probably reflected your age at that time. So were you looking, as you got old, were you looking to do something different to reflect more of who you were as a person, or did your comic sense mature? What would you say?
Well, yes, I think all the above. Just to answer your question before, 22 with Not Another Teen Movie, I think I was aware at that time that I was very lucky to be going through that experience at such a young age. Um, I'd like to say I was super mature, but I'm sure like any 22-year-old, I was enjoying that experience, and to even just have a movie that gets made is so rare. So I look back on it very fondly, and the people that were on that movie, Chris, and the whole cast, everyone was young, so
Mhm.
everybody was really. There were not a lot of egos, and we were able to write stuff on set, and it was a freedom to that movie that
Mm.
I look back on. I really enjoy. As I got out of Not Another Teen Movie, the very first thing I wrote after that was a script called Fistful of Candy at Sony, which was the same studio that did Not Another Teen Movie. And Fistful of Candy
Mhm.
was it was a kids movie. I loved Christmas
Ah,
Story as a kid growing
yeah.
up, and I thought I wanted to write that Christmas Story, but for Halloween, which was
Okay.
for me my favorite holiday because you could dress up and become anything you wanted. And I just thought
Mhm.
it's the coolest holiday. It's the only holiday that's truly designed for children, and it's just involves so much imagination, that holiday. So Fistful of Candy was a Western. It was Shane. It was a
Yeah.
share of Shane told on Halloween. So kids who get their candy stolen, because candy is gold in a kid's world.
Yeah.
So they get their candy stolen every year by these bandits, the kids who dress up as bandits. And then on this one Halloween, a new kid shows up in town, kind of our pale rider, and he helps the townspeople, the kids, take back Halloween. And I love that project. But just as an example, that coming off of Teen Movie, the very first thing I wanted to do was a kids project. So it's always
Yeah.
been there, that urge.
Okay.
And I didn't have a family then, but I think I just love writing for children.
Mhm. What happened to Fistful of Candy?
I was hoping you could tell me. Um, no, it was in development for a very long time. It was during that period of time when you write a script and then everyone says, okay, now we got to get Adam Sandler attached to it. And it's not going
Ah,
to get made unless Will Ferrell. And I wrote a movie for kids, It was like Christmas Story. There were no stars. There was no, it wasn't about the adults. It was truly about kids. And so, you know, it was like 2, 3 years of development, and it's still there today.
Okay.
But
So we got to keep an eye out for it.
I hope so. If there's any
Yeah.
project I would wish to happen, it would be that one. But anyway, after that, I think I wrote for many years, wrote a lot of scripts. And then as the movie industry started to change around 2008, it's kind of when there were more sequels and there was less original projects. I started to look towards the internet, and look and say, you know, this is an interesting space. It's a new space. And it looked very attractive to me, because there was less barriers to creating thing than with film. Everything with film had to get approved, and then this had to get approved. It just that process got old for me.
And how did you and Doug, I mean, it started with your own family photo, right?
Yeah, what happened was we were actually working on a script at Warner Brothers at the time. I went home to Santa Barbara. Doug, I grew up with in New Jersey. So we went to high school together. And we had been writing together. And I went home to actually Santa Barbara, where my parents live. And they were putting up a photo in their living room. It was framed photo of my dad and my brother and I as a ski trip. And we were doing like Rockettes kicks with our skis, or we were forced to. And I was 13 or 14. And I just remember feeling like, why is my mom putting up that photo? Why is she memorializing that photo? That's like a painful photo. It's so awkward. And then I think I got home and I thought, man, that's kind of a really good idea. Like what if we took the photos that we're sort of most ashamed of and the most uncomfortable photos, but put them out front and shine a light on them? That's kind of interesting. And it isn't that far from the kind of thinking of a parody, because a parody, you're flipping things on their head. And in this case, it was similar. It was like, yeah, normally these are the photos you keep in a drawer, but wait, let's do the exact opposite. Let's put them out there. And that was the jumping off point for Awkward Family Photos.
Well, these photos are amazing. I mean, here, I'll just put a couple of them up here. That poor kid, I mean, Spider-Man's absolutely creepy.
Low budget Halloween there.
And then we have, I'll send a couple more here. This poor kid is probably going to therapy still.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, I think every single person in the world, whether you've taken that photo or not, can relate to that feeling. The feeling where everyone is looking at you, or you feel like everyone's looking at you. In this case, they actually are. But yeah, this photo, I haven't seen this photo for a long time. I know you pulled this off the site. It's pretty hilarious. Just, yeah, that was set up that way.
But then, then it became a book. And I'd like you to talk about the actual book, because the site was very successful. And then it's kind of a gamble to do a book after a site, but you guys became a New York Times best-selling book.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing. It's quite a phenomenon, I have to say.
Wow. It was, I could say I look back on Teen Movie as such a great experience. I wish I could say that period of time was like this amazing experience. It was so stressful because we had launched the website on this like cheap $9 WordPress website. And a friend of mine who worked for a radio station was like, I'll throw it up on the website, our radio station website in Rhode Island. And he did. And it just exploded through these radio station websites, which is kind of a weird way for a website to take off. But at that time, you got to remember, there's no BuzzFeed, there's no, Huffington Post might have been real early days, but it took off and it blew up so fast. All of a sudden, we have millions of people coming to the site. We only had like 7 photos on the entire website, and our site's crashing. And Doug and I we don't even know we've never even set up a Facebook page. So we're just like two guys who have no idea what we're doing, trying to keep a website afloat while you're getting all this traffic, and it's coming in from all over the world. We're getting submissions to our Gmail inbox, from the Middle East and from Asia and from, Russia. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And so I think it took us like 3-4 months just to stabilize. And then
Mhm.
we started to get emails from publishers saying, would you guys want to do a book? And of course, at that time, we loved the idea, but we had no idea even how to license the images or get them from the families. So that was a huge learning curve, because we had to reach out to everybody and then have them
Mhm.
sign documents. And it was quite an effort for two guys to take on. But that was how it started. And we heard from a few publishers. We ended up going with Random House, and we had an amazing editor. Her name was Suzanne O'Neill, and she just supported us so wholeheartedly that it was a great experience. And that first book came together really, really beautifully. And we ended up
Mhm.
doing 2 more books with her, 3 more books with her at Random House, around awkward family photos. And then I did a
Mhm.
children's book actually called Everything is Awkward, also
Mhm.
with Random House kids. So we've had and all these books I'm doing now are all with Random House. So I've been there ever since, and that's all because of
Mhm.
awkward family photos.
Oh, wow. Wow. In the meantime, you had your own family. You married Sue Chin Pak, and
Yes.
then you had your son Kai, and then Zoe came along a couple of years later, your daughter Zoe. Um, did that change your focus on your art?
Um, absolutely. Um, I think that from the moment I had children, it completely changed what I was passionate about. Um, I started reading them books, children's books.
Mhm.
I was able to kind of revisit some of these books that for me had been so impactful, and Harold and the Purple Crayon, and reading books like that, and
Mhm.
you see how they react to them. And then I thought, wow, I would love to have that kind of impact. I would love to write a book that a kid would remember for years and years and years. And so when I'd put my kids to sleep, oftentimes at night, and any parent knows those are, those are those are contemplative hours when you put your kids to sleep and you're sitting in the room in the dark. I think that's where my brain started to go and think about, let's think about a children's book. Let's write a children's book.
Mhm.
And that's, truthfully, I was sitting in the dark with my son in my son's room, in Kai's room, and I was surrounded by darkness and nothing. And that's when I got the idea, well, what if I could write a book about nothing? Like as a challenge,
Mhm.
be really interesting to sort of create a whole book just truly about nothing at all. And
Mhm.
that was the jumping off point for the book about nothing. And I
Mhm.
then took that to Random House, and said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I want to write a children's book. And the editor there, Emily Easton, um, was brave enough to say, all right, let's try it.
Did you find that this is the genre that you really enjoyed doing?
I think it's been the most writing children's books for me has been uh, given me the most joy. It's been the most satisfying of all of them.
Mhm.
It's a long road. It takes many years, as you know, to write a book. You write it, you
Mhm.
send in the manuscript, the art, the illustrations, all takes a long time, a couple
Yeah.
years, 1.5, 2 years, sometimes longer. So it's when you get there and you get that finished product in your hand, it's very, very exciting. And then to be
Mhm.
able to read it to kids, hear from kids when they read it. Um, I was saying to someone else the other day, I would take reading to a class over a movie premiere now any day of the week. And when I was in my
Uh-huh.
20s, all I wanted to do was go to a movie premiere. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Now it's like I want to read to a group of kids. I want to read to a classroom of kids. That's fun.
So when we open up, we'll have you read your latest book, if you don't mind,
Yep.
when we open up to the public. So please do that. Um, in this latest book, the end is just the beginning. It's quite beautiful, but it also has influence from your own life. Something happened to you when you're a child uh, that is affecting you now. And if you want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah. It's funny. I wasn't sure at first whether I even wanted to like bring this up, and in
Mhm.
terms of like how it relates to the book, but it really is how the book came about. I was
Mhm.
bit by a tick when I was 11 years old. Long story short, my 30s, I started to have issues and took a long time to discover I had Lyme disease. And it has been a challenge for me physically. Uh,
Mhm.
continues to be a challenge physically,
Mhm.
and and so I, at the time I started to have issues, and my kids were seeing that my dad can't do certain things. He can't, run around with me as much. And
Mhm.
so I was kind of dealing with the end of many things in my own life. And so um, I wanted to, I think when you're dealing with anything chronic, you can get pretty down. And I wanted to try and find a positive spin. Again, let's turn it on its head. Let's go the opposite direction, right? And so in this case, it's, well, what if we can take a look at ends from a really positive point of view?
Mhm.
Kids tend to mourn endings. I see with my own children.
Mhm.
It's the end of a movie. I don't want to go to bed. Oh, it's the end of dessert. Can I have some more? Um,
Yeah.
Endings are a bad thing from a kid's perspective, oftentimes. But what if we could present endings as something that are exciting and transformative? That was the challenge here. And so it
Mhm.
really started with this idea of, I'm going to end the book on page 1. And
Mhm.
how the hell do I tell a story if I end the book on page 1? Again, it was like the book about nothing. It always starts with a challenge. And
Yeah.
so that was the challenge. And from that grew kind of, I think, the concept and the ideas around the concept that ended up in the book. And then coupled with Diana's beautiful illustrations, which quite frankly,
Mhm.
I think took it to another level that I didn't even,
Mhm.
I had nothing to do with. But
Mhm.
I think it's all those things that really are making the book special.
Well, we'll have you read the book in a second, but I wanted to touch base more about Diana. She lives in the UK. So how was that? How difficult? What were the challenges of collaborating with somebody across the other side of the world? Was that
Well, the
difficult?
crazy, yeah, no, I was sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to cut you off. The
No,
the
no.
the crazy thing about illustrations in a children's book, especially working at a publisher like Random House, you don't really have any contact, right? You turn in your manuscript, and they control that process. They keep the writer and the illustrator separate. They don't
Okay.
want us to talk, and so
Oh, okay.
I don't really have any contact with Diana until I see her initial drawings. And so a lot of that as a writer is kind of unnerving because you don't know what
Yeah.
you're going to get until it shows up. And in Diana's case, when it showed up, I was just like blown away. Um,
Mm.
so I felt really lucky and grateful, that I had that my words got, I got to have her be the person to bring those
Mhm.
words to life. So it's a mysterious process, I think, uh,
Mm.
with the illustrator, but in this case, it really worked out well.
I, I see a similarity with a screenwriter and a movie script because once they write it, it's in the hands of the director, producers, and the performers. And it's kind of similar that you have to give something up. But in this case, I think collaboration was really beautiful. And why don't we go ahead and start here if you don't mind reading your book?
Yeah,
The end is just the beginning. Just let me know when you're ready and we'll go
okay.
through these
Yeah,
here.
and these are, I think I was telling you before we got on here, I'm a huge fan of end papers. For those who don't know, end
Yeah.
papers are those pages that are, well, one page is glued on the front, one's glued on the back. It's kind of pages that before the book begins. For what the illustrator does so beautifully is brings the concept into those end papers. In this case, Diana did a really beautiful job of what you see here, which is a storm. And when you get to the end of the book, obviously it's going to shift. It's going to be the beginning of something else.
Here's our second page.
Yep.
Okay, you ready to read?
I'm ready. I can do it.
All right.
Yeah, it's a beautiful page too. The end is just the beginning. The end. And if I'm reading this to a group of kids, I just close the book. The end. That's right. You've read it correctly. You've reached the end and the beginning. But wait, how can a book possibly start with the end? That is ridiculous. Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because the end isn't really the end. It's just the beginning of something else. Like this beautiful sunset. It sure seems like the end of the day, right? Not so fast. You see, when the sun goes down, it's actually just the beginning of the night. Spring is sprung here. When all the snow melts at the end of winter, that just means it's the beginning of spring. This is a funny page to have to read. Hold on, I got the book in front of me, so I can read it from the book on this one. If you try to go to the ends of the earth, you'll actually just keep going back to the beginning, because the earth is one big circle.
Oh.
If you blast off in a rocket ship, you'll reach the end of the sky. Otherwise known as the beginning of outer space. When you count, the end of one number is just the beginning of the next number. And so on, and so on, and so on, all the way to infinity, which, by the way, never ends. Even a sign that literally says dead end isn't an end at all. It's only just the beginning of whatever lies beyond it. So when you really think about it, the end is entirely endless. The end of a disagreement with someone is just the beginning of making up. The end of a mistake is just the beginning of learning something new. The end of being sick is just the beginning of feeling better. The end of dinner is just the beginning of dessert. you're really well behaved, the end of dessert might just be the beginning of more dessert. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and go to bed, don't think of it as the end of anything. Just think of it as the beginning of a new tomorrow full of possibilities. Got our butterfly. The beginning of discovering the next book. I love this page. And we got our end papers here at the end. So we see our storm has turned into a rainbow, and the next page has all the butterflies. Yeah, and just just as a note, Diana, everything's hand drawn, and she uses collage as well in there.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful mix of different styles of art, and she's very old school about how she illustrates. It's it's really beautiful stuff.
Your son he's going to be 9, right?
Yes.
Okay. Happy birthday, Kai, early. And your daughter Soy is 7.
Yes.
They seem to be an influence on your latest writing. And my question to you is, are they going to get royalties from you on this one?
Well, don't give me any ideas, Mike, because they learn about what royalties are. Yes, they will want that. Absolutely. I mean, I will say this about my kids is I read them these books like 150 times. By the time they're published, I've read them so many versions of this that they're like, yeah, I know the book. But they're really helpful to me, because when I read to them, I can see what they react to, what stuff really like piques, gets their imagination going. I can see when they get a little bored. It's very, very helpful to have those little testers so that I can see what's working and what's not. And my daughter is, I have absolutely zero artistic skill, like in terms of drawing, and she's really she's really turned into this beautiful artist. And so when I share books with her, she's really also into the art. And I love that. I love that, having that, like that eye as we kind of go through different projects. So, but I absolutely involve them in everything I do. And I want them to know, I think especially when you're like getting sick and you're dealing with stuff, sometimes you think about your own mortality. And I wanted them to know that, most importantly, that any ideas that they have, they can turn into something. You can create a book out of just an idea from sitting in a room and having one thought in your head about starting a book with the end, and then suddenly you actually have a physical book in your hand. And that if I could leave them with that kind of one thing, that I'd feel really good about that.
They've also been a help in marketing your book a little bit too.
Yeah. So I went to take a picture here in Santa Barbara with my kids, and what happens? They get in a fight about who's holding the book, and then you get as I now think of it, the serendipity of awkwardness, which worked out perfectly, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to post to Awkward Family Photos. This is too earnest, this book, in some ways, for that crowd. It's not snarky enough. But then when that happened, I thought, oh man, this is perfect. This is exactly what it's about. You go to do one thing with kids, and that's not always what you get. And that's the beauty, to me, of awkwardness. And that's because you're getting a taste of what's real. When you see a photo where everyone's smiling and in matching outfits, that's not real. We're not happy all the time with our families. Like that's our hope of what we want family to be. But
Mhm,
I like when you get the little cracks in the glass and you see what's really going.
mhm. It it's a very existential story, and I love how you use the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into a butterfly and how things change, and the end of a beautiful caterpillar is the beginning of a new butterfly. How did you get that idea? Because I think it's quite remarkable.
Well, I was trying to think of I wanted a narrator because when you're dealing with like a concept like this that's more thematic, I still wanted to have some characters and a storyteller. And so that was the first thought, okay, we're going to start with the end, but then someone has to take us through this concept. Someone has to explain this concept to kids. And so what is a character that can not only explain it, but then sort of be a metaphor for it itself, for the end
Mm,
meaning. So I wanted to think about animals that go through some sort of a change. And
mhm,
then, then you're also thinking about the visual. A butterfly or the caterpillar to butterfly metamorphosis felt like just the perfect way because throughout the story that character is slowly changing, and then eventually it's in the chrysalis and it's getting ready to become a butterfly.
mhm,
So it just fit perfectly. And Diana took that and then was able to sort of put the caterpillar in different. If you go through the book, you can see on different pages very fine details. The caterpillar is there, or it's if you see that tree in the background. So it just added another layer. But
mm,
yeah, it was the perfect metaphor. And at first, to be honest with you, I thought, oh, is this going to be too cliche if I
mm,
use a caterpillar? But I
mhm,
think it's really been amazing to hear just back from people and people who have read the book and how much they're connecting with that kind of butterfly metaphor and
mhm.
they um, see that as something that's really like inspiring. So I think in the end it really was the perfect way to get into the book.
Mm, I agree. If you have any questions, please type them in right now. I'll ask you one more question before we go to the audience. Usually when you release in the time of COVID, it's been a tough go for writers. I've read a lot of people, their sales are suffering and whatnot, and I understand that because there's no personal events. But I think with your book's overarching theme about new beginnings, I think it fits perfectly with this time as we begin to open up our worlds post-COVID in what we hope is a post-COVID world. Wouldn't you agree? I think the timing of this book came along at the right time.
Absolutely. I mean, I like like we were talking about. I wrote this. It was inspired by my own sort of situation, but
Mhm,
I could never have imagined how relevant this book would be right now, because as a globe, as a global society, we've all gone through massive, massive transformations and ends of being able to walk outside without wearing a mask. Our children, couldn't go to school anymore the way that they went to school and were on computers. Um, I think that it's the perfect example in some ways of the end being just the beginning. And looking at it that way, it allows you to frame where we are right now with COVID and say, okay, what have we learned from this? Well, I know in my case, it allowed me to spend more time with my family. And suddenly I valued, playing games with my kids more and putting a puzzle
mhm,
together like that. Those were my days when we were like really quarantined. And those aren't things any of us would have normally done if we were just kind of business as usual. And so that, sometimes the end is just the beginning. It's the beginning of a new way of thinking. It's the beginning of seeing the world in a different way or seeing your own self in a different way. Those are beginnings. And so I think all of us have probably taken away something um, from this experience and grown, whether it's spiritually or physically from it. But yeah, I think everybody, that my editor, we were all kind of, when this was sort of about to come out, thinking this is so crazy how relevant it is now. And so I hope people find some comfort in that message, especially now, because I know there's a lot of people that are still hurting and suffering, and it's still a very, very tricky time. We're certainly not out of it, but I hope we're close to it.
Mhm. And if we do get close to this, you're going to go, hopefully you'll be able to go out and read to the kids, and that would be huge,
Yeah.
I think.
By the way, it's not easy to read to a group of children with a mask on. I read to my daughter's class, and the problem is if you can't see someone's face, it's very hard for kids to kind of get the cues as to like when to laugh or when to. So like reading a children's book, you want to be animated, and it's when you put on that mask, you're just two eyes. So I'm with you, and I look forward to being able to read a book with my full face.
So in the meantime, are you working on something else?
Yeah. So I actually, because these books take so long, it gives you a good 2.5 years to think of another idea. I actually, the same at Random House and the same editor, have my next book is called Bored Panda, and it is based on a website called Bored Panda, which some people might be familiar with. At Bored Panda, I was a huge fan of Bored Panda because you discover all these like really weird, unique artists from all over the world on Bored Panda. And so I actually contacted them about 2.5 years ago. They're located, their founders are in Lithuania.
Oh,
And
wow.
I wrote them and just said, listen, I have an idea for a children's book about Bored Panda. And would you guys be interested in sort of going along with this? And I sent them the manuscript. I just wrote it. And they were like, okay. I don't think anybody had pitched them a children's book. But I love the idea of boredom being a window into creativity. So again, it's like you look at boredom, or kids look at boredom as this negative thing. I'm bored. I got nothing to do. And when I say to my kids, it's like, that's awesome. You're bored. You're going to come up with the greatest idea. You're going to build something amazing. You're going to discover something that you wouldn't have discovered if you weren't bored. So Bored Panda is kind of, the character is like, think of it as like the uncurious George. It's a character who's like so bored about everything that it's, through his own boredom that he ends up discovering these artists in the forest, and then has a realization about boredom. But that's the next book. So it's written, and we are, in the process of connecting with an illustrator on that book.
Wow, I can't wait.
I look forward to sharing it with you 8 years from now.
In the meantime, Mike, thank you for spending some time with us out here.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful book, and I wish everyone goes out there and purchases it, because it's a really entertaining, beautiful book with a strong message. So thank you all for joining us. And Mike Bender, I wish you the best of luck and the best of health to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we opening it up at all?
I don't see any. Do we have any questions? Feel free. It is open. Or we could just stare at each other awkwardly here.
I mean, this is great. It's just the end of no questions is the beginning of going on and getting some food. No,
all right.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike, for leading the discussion. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you again. And we'll be in touch to get you to sign some copies for us. Okay.
Okay. You got it.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.